Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It is so good to see you again today. Hey, in today's video, what I'm going to be doing is highlighting some Michigan distilleries who people are starting to talk about. They're creating a bit of a buzz. Their bottles are hitting shelves all over the states, and people are starting to be pretty impressed with the products that they're pumping out. So I figured I'd highlight three of my favorite distilleries right here in Michigan where I live, and maybe you'll have a better idea of what to keep an eye out for when you're out shopping. And we'll see if these distilleries can actually hang with the bourbon boys from Kentucky. So I'm gonna move to the couch. We'll start pouring some drams. So the three bottles that we're gonna be taking a look at today are the Dragon's Milk Origin bottle. This is actually a really cool bottle, I will say that. That one comes from New Holland. So New Holland Brewing Company, they started out as a brewer of beer, and they made a great name for themselves in that department. Like Dragon's Milk became pretty well renowned across the states. They've got a number of other beers that are really popular, like the Tangerine Space Machine, stuff like that. It's actually one of my wife and I's favorite locations to go out for like date night. Sometimes we take the kids there because they got great food, great atmosphere, amazing beer, but then they also started distilling as well. They do pot stilling, and they started making a name for themselves in the whiskey world as well, which is pretty cool. So they were some of the first beer brewers to start using bourbon barrels to age their stouts in. That's where Dragon's Milk came from. And then they can then take that Dragon's Milk barrel that had bourbon and then beer and then do bourbon in it again. And that's how they do their finishing process with their beer barrel finish. So that is, boom, what we're going to do first. After that, we're going to do Gray Sky. Oh, I say Gray Skies. Eastern Kill. They used to be Gray Skies. Back when I first became aware of them in Grand Rapids, a distillery in Grand Rapids. And when they first came onto the scene, they were called Gray Skies. Then they rebranded as Eastern Kill. And their bottle is really cool. It's got sort of a topographical map of Lake Michigan on the back, and they use water from the Great Lakes in their proofing, mashing, all that. So that's sort of their shtick. Their breakfast rye is really good, so I'm excited to dive into their bottled and bond, which is what they've just started putting out on the shelves this year. So cool that they've got a bottled and bond expression now, which means that it's at least 4 years old and that it's been bonded with government oversight in a government approved warehouse. So that's cool, and 100 proof. So that's cool. And then we'll move on finally to we got Traverse City Whiskey Company. This is their barrel proof bourbon. Now I will say their barrel proof series is getting a lot of acclaim right now, especially the wheat whiskey. So they have a barrel proof wheat whiskey, which is at least 51% wheat. They don't disclose their mash bills. It's interesting. I don't think we have the official mash bill on any of these, which I actually wish they would. I am a big fan of transparency when it comes to distilleries, so I love when they give you all the information up front. But anyways, Traverse City Whiskey Company, this is their bourbon. I'll be excited to dive into that too. So this is the barrel proof. This one, so ages on the table. This is a 6-year. The barrel proof from Traverse City Whiskey Company is a 6-year. This one is at least 4, we know, because it's bottled and bond. And we got 5 years on the small batch of Dragon's Milk Origin. So let's dive into these one at a time. We'll start right there with the Dragon's Milk Origin. The first thing I can say about Dragon's Milk, this bottle, so cool. Like, it is so cool. It's got like dragon scales on it, and it's got this gradient, like dark on top, and then it comes down to that amber in the bottom where it's a clear bottle down there. So that gives it this really cool aesthetic, like it's, I don't know, welling up from the inside. It's on fire. You can think really leaning into that dragon aesthetic, which is super dope. So big props to their marketing team, because that is a killer bottle. I think anyone would like to have that as sort of a display piece on their shelf. Now they do pot still, and they don't disclose the mash bill, but they say that it's a high barley mash bill. So it's a bourbon, but high barley, I don't know if that's 20%, 25%, what's high? I don't know, it's all relative. But I can definitely say that I do get some of that cereal maltiness off of the barley on the nose. That sweet raisin mixed in with a little bit of like a floral note and even a little bit of butterscotch in there. So it doesn't give you that big dusty corn bourbon vibe up front. Let's try it. If you had told me that that was an American single malt, I would have believed you. It's got that dark, roasty, malty vibe that you would get. I used to actually homebrew beer, all grain. I wouldn't do extracts. So I would get my own, I'd buy my own grains and malts, malted barleys and stuff like that for the beers I would make. This really reminds me of some of those dark, roasty malts. That's what it reminds me of. Real roasty, deep chocolates. A little bit of a fruity note in there. As a bourbon, I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure that I dig it. I mean, I love New Holland, don't get me wrong. And I'm a happy consumer of many products of theirs. I don't think this one's it. This tastes like a whiskey with an identity crisis. You know, they took a risk, they did something different, but I'm not sure that I'm vibing with it. It almost leans too heavily into that roastiness that kind of gives it almost, I don't know why I want to say unpleasant, but it's not playful on the palate like I would want it to be. Amazing bottle, great marketing, interesting whiskey. I don't think it's my vibe though. Now we move on to Eastern Kill. I talked a little bit about them. They pot still as well here in Grand Rapids. Oh, okay. That nose is really butterscotchy, but it also has this sort of, I don't know if it, not necessarily melon, maybe more like an apricot, kind of a yellow fruit vibe in there too. I know they like to do a high rye mash bill. But yeah, it's that combination of butterscotch and that floral fruity note. That's a very pleasant nose. Let's try it. Well, that's quite different coming off of the Dragon's Milk. Yeah, I like that a lot more. You get a little bit of like a white peppercorn kind of a vibe going on, especially towards the finish. Not a ton of oak on it. It leans more heavily, I think, into the sweet and spicy vibe. It's that duality between the rye and the corn in the mash. And those two things kind of going back and forth with each other. And it's not like those more mature rye flavors you get when a rye mellows out over time. Obviously, this is probably right on 4 years old, somewhere around at least 4 years old. I am not going to guess that it's any older than that. And for this one, it works because that rye, it hasn't mellowed out enough that it sort of fades into the background. It's very present. It's got some of that edginess to it, but it's softened by the sweetness of the corn in there. That's a delightful drink. I like that a lot. And finally, we move on to the Traverse City Whiskey Company. In color alone, this is the darkest one on the table. It's also the oldest. So this is a 6-year-old bourbon. It is 118.2 proof. So this one's got the highest proof, the most age. It's been chilling the longest time. It is also uncut. All right, let's give her a shot. Now, it doesn't say so, but I'm assuming this is the same mash bill as their standard bourbon, which I think is 75% corn. 71% corn, 25% rye, and 4% malted barley. You definitely get hit with that ethanol on the nose, but it's not overpowering. It's a real sweet heat and a good roasty, caramely, nutty vibe to it too. Maybe like those circus peanut candies too. The nose alone reminds me of like a Beam product. I think it almost reminds me of that Knob Creek 12. Knob Creek 12. One of the things I know that stands out to me about the Knob Creek 12 is definitely that barrel funk. This one, the Knob 12, I don't get quite as much heat on the nose, but I definitely get that same musty barrel funk. I say that, it almost sounds like a bad thing. It's definitely not. I love that note. And this kind of reminds me of that aspect of the Knob 12. Definitely get that barrel funk. A little bit of those muted, matured rye notes as well. You get those sort of yellow fruit notes that come through that sweeten out a little bit of melon. Let's try it. Ooh, that is sweet, caramely, buttery, and viscous on the palate. The finish then transitions to a little bit of that rye spice that kind of comes along. And then that barrel funk. It tastes like a bourbon that just sat in a dark, damp corner of a warehouse, untouched, and uncorrupted for years. That's a great note. That has a delightful amount of complexity to it. You even get a little bit of that baking spice, like your cinnamons and brown sugars, kind of right there in the middle of the palate, right before it transitions to the finish. And that finish does linger for quite a bit, too, that barrel funk note. Love that. I mean, if I had to rank these three, they would go in the opposite order that I tasted them. This is number one by a landslide. This is the best whiskey on the table for me and for my palate. This one's a great sipper. Like it. Obviously, you got a price jump here between a bottled and bond up into a barrel-proof 6-year. So this one I think is around $80. Here you're looking at I think 45. I think the Origin small batch is also that 40 to 45 range as well. So I think they are most expensive to least expensive, and that's the way they taste too. This one is not necessarily doesn't taste expensive. I mean, it's worth the price point. This is delicious. Like this one a lot. This is a great sipper. This one I don't think I would buy again. I really like the bottling. It's an interesting whiskey, but I actually like their Zeppelin blend, I think, more than this one, but that's just me. So, well, there you go. There's an introduction to some Michigan distilleries and what they're making right now, what products are putting out on the shelf. I would tell you the breakfast rye from Eastern Kill is definitely a buy. If you see that one for a decent price, pick that up. Should be around $40 as well. That one's a great bottle. I love that bottle. Maple, I think it's like a maple syrup barrel finished rye. It's delicious. They're also starting to offer some barrel proof products as well. The Traverse City Whiskey Company, I don't think I would recommend their standard offerings very much, but their barrel proof series so far to me has really been worth it. Try this one, try the wheat one as well. You might find yourself something that you're like, okay, I got to have more of that on my shelf out of them. Which one of these would you like to try the most, just based off of my tasting notes alone? I'd love to hear from you. And if you had any of these offerings or anything else out of Michigan that you liked and want to make a comment on, feel free to do that in the comments as well. Hey, thank you so much to all my Patreon supporters, because each and every one of these bottles I picked up with the Patreon money that came in from last month. So thank you so much for that. Appreciate you. You're helping fund these videos, and that makes it worthwhile to me. So thanks. So cheers. May you get better with age and live richly, my friends. Bye-bye.